Good morning, everybody. It's about 10:07. I'm getting started real early because I want to end early, right? Why drag it out? Let's just get to it and get it done. Um, so here's the deal. As you can see, when we start a new project in Logic, there's some new stuff going on here. I don't know if you guys noticed when you upgraded Logic to, was it 10.5 or 12.5, whatever it's up to now. I think it's 10.5. There is a few new features that can be accessed with the new version. Obviously, we know about an empty project. That's the way we start every project. But now there's a live loops template. And you can see this, the stuff down here doesn't really change. It's just a matter of creating an empty loop thing where it almost as like a sampler and all that other good stuff. One of the new big upgrades to Logic. Starter grids is interesting. I don't know if anybody explored this part of Logic, but obviously with the live loops, there is some sort of presets that you can choose from. And these are kind of cool. The boom bap masher, vision and verse. They gave, of course, fancy little names here to all sorts of stuff. So you can kind of mess around with that. Let's see what a reggaeton pop masher is. I'm interested in this really quick, just to show what it is. Well, this is not 5.1, by the way. We're just exploring a couple of new features today of the new Logic. Look at that, loading up all that. Wow, what is going on here? Look at this. It's fantastic is what it is. So when we push play now, I'll turn this up a little bit. You see how this works? So now what you have access to is the ability to basically have what's that the launch pad, which is basically just a MIDI device that triggers sound. So as we get into understanding this, it's just a bunch of loops that you can now just click on. That's really all it is. There it is, going back into it. Stop that one, stop this one. And you're just basically a DJ right now. I'm gonna put the beat back in there in a minute. And here it is. Right, so you can sit there and play with that all day. So that's what live loops is, just so you guys know. And you can actually load in all your loops. What the hell is all this? Who's drawing on my whiteboard? Basically creating things that, here we go, get a new one. Creating a map, a roadmap of all the loops you'd like to put in there, and then you can trigger them live. That's why it's called live loops, because basically it's going to be used in a live format. It basically takes the place of main stage. And if anyone know what main stage was, it was the ability to use Logic and all of its content live on stage, including things like a drummer and samples and stuff like that. There are some tutorials for anyone that would like to find out information. You can take tutorials about the live loops, take tutorials about the quick sampler, that new EXS24, and then there's a step sequencer as well. A couple demo projects. Oh, look at that. It's Billie Eilish. And of course, we have our project templates, and that's kind of where, we're going to kind of pick up from here. I want you to take a look at the settings here at the bottom really fast, though. So when I start a new project as an empty project, we know about the default information, the 120 BPM, C44, right? Our interface, input and output, sample rate, frame rate for film. And then down here, there is your surround sound format. And so here is where you can start by programming the way the software is going to interact with 5.1 sound. It actually does go up to 7.1. So that's relatively interesting, we'll say, because 7.1 right now, even though it's a lot of speakers, it's 8 speakers in your room, is pretty much like the mid-range of surround sound in most theaters at this point. So if you're producing for the theater, you probably want to be up in 7.1. If you're producing for like home audio and surround sound, or studio surround sound. It's usually 5.1. And then they have these two other ones here that are interesting. The LCRS, which is Pro Logic, and it's a way of basically having 4 speakers without the center or the sub. And then there's quadraphonic. Quadraphonic, yes. Quad means 4. So you're going to be listening to things, 4 speakers in the room, basically a left and a right, a left back and a right back. So it's just 4 speakers set up. Now, technically, I wouldn't be producing for that unless it was going to be that. A lot of times, gaming does quadraphonics. Right now, they don't use 5.1 because you're wearing a headphone set. You don't need a sub. You don't really need a center. So, 4 speakers is pretty much it. For us, what we're going to do is actually we're going to look at things kind of studio cinematically. We'll do 5.1 ITU right now because it's the most common. It's like the default surround sound. So let's pop that in there and then hit create a new prompt. I want you to add new tracks. So for this particular demo, we're just going to add an audio track because what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my surround sound file. So this file, it actually says it on it, that it's a surround sound file, 6 channels in AAC format. Now, AAC we know is wave format, so it's uncompressed. And I'm sorry. AIFF is uncompressed. AAC is compressed. So this is equivalent or better than a MP3 file. So it's a relatively small file. But remember, it has 6 channels. So instead of stereo having 2, a left and a right, now you have one file that's containing 6 different signals in it. So let's pop that into the software. And as we drag it in, it's going to ask me to change my to whatever sample rate it wants me to. No other audio in here to worry about. If I were to zoom in and expand this track really quick, you're going to see that you don't really see 6 streams just yet of audio, right? You're not seeing 6 different individual visualizations of the waveforms for channels 1 through 6. So how do we read those 6 channels? Well, there's a bunch of ways. Obviously, let's take a look at our nice little channel strip settings. Of course, nothing much has changed here except for 2 major things. Of course, the input telling you that now it's in surround sound format. So if you look at this, you can actually fold it down to mono, pop it into stereo, just through the left channel, just to a right channel, or stay in surround. And then down here, you see that you're monitoring in surround sound. You can fold it down to stereo if you'd like, but we're going to keep it in surround. And then you'll notice that the panner looks different. Let's double click on the panner and look at that. Pretty cool, right? So we have our 5 speakers as part of the 5.1. And the 0.1 is going to be your low frequency subwoofer, which is the LFE right down here. Our center angle obviously is got to be, I've set our level has got to be set to 0. We're not going to move anything right now. We're just going to kind of take a look at what it's going to see or sound like when we push play. So you're going to be only listening to the right-hand channel, which is your closest channel. And the other thing is we're only playing out of a stereo speaker. We're only playing out of a laptop that has a left and a right. But we are still going to hear some of the 5.1 effects, meaning we're going to hear it, push off distance. Kind of what we were talking about yesterday. Remember yesterday when we used the panner and we were able to move stuff behind our head, because our head would be right here in the center. So if we move something back here, we actually heard it, lower in volume. And we also hear it kind of muffle a little bit. It actually starts pulling the high frequencies down just enough to make it sound like it's coming from behind your head. And again, remember how sound works. If sound is behind you, it's going to sound a little muffled because your pinna, the outside of your ear, is blocking direct sound from getting directly into your ears. So it's going to give it that effect of a little bit of muffled. That's how your brain perceives sound that's behind your head or sound that's relatively behind the left and right ears where the pinna would block any direct sound. And it's so slight, but your brain picks up such subtleties. So let's take a listen to this really quick. You're very familiar with the old Dolby Surround and stuff like that. So here is the Paramount, I believe. Paramount Pictures? I don't know. Whatever it is. Take a listen. Or not. Why is that not playing? It just played a minute ago. Why? Did I change the output? No, I didn't. Interesting. Yeah, let's do this. Sometimes it does this. 5-1 test. We'll save it, and then we'll just open it again. Yeah, sometimes weird things are subtly changed. This should do it, because then it'll react to the new settings that we may have or may not have changed in the sample rate and all that other good stuff. So let's see what happens here. There you go. Right. So that is your typical movie start. And like I said, what we're looking at here is a stereo um, left and right waveform, but what we're really having is a 5.1 mix. A couple other things changed, as you notice, is when we did a playback here, is that our meters now are much different. All right. Now we can actually explore it even further. So let's take a look at an audio effect. We'll go down to meters. These are the basic ones that are given to you with Logic. Let's just do a level meter to start out and take a listen to that. Let's do it again. Pretty cool, right? So here we got the left side, which is left rear, and the right rear. You have LCR, left, center, right, and then the LFE. And you can see that the LFE is being fed by just low frequencies. I don't know about you, but when I go in the theater, I actually whistle that part every time. So there's the level meter showing you that each individual channel is being fed with its own signal. All right. Now, if we get into the actual clip that's in here, it's, I believe it's Fast and Furious 5.1 trailer, but take a listen. So what you're seeing is actual independent channels. Left has like its own stream. Some of it has more of the music in it than the others. So what you could imagine if you're sitting where I am, or if you have a 5.1 sound system set up, if you were to close your eyes, you would actually hear some of those car noises off to the left, which means on screen, you should be seeing those cars off to the left or whatever action is happening that the speaker is referring to. So left side or left rear and left have a lot of information about what's going on the left-hand part of the visual picture. Let's take a look at another meter, because these are actually really cool and interesting to look at. This is the loudness meter. And so this is interesting. So the mono signal is here on the left-hand side. The stereo signal is here in the middle, and an integrated part. So what it's doing is showing you the difference in sound between mono and stereo. I'll let it play for a second. If you can see, at times, the mono signal is a little louder than the stereo. And now, right going on, depending on what's happening in the actual trailer, it looks like the stereo signal actually is a lot louder. So in 5.1, there are times where mono takes over, and there's times when stereo takes over and is a louder part of the mix. This is a way that you can now judge whether your mix as a 5.1 will be relatively loud, or if it ever gets folded down to a television streaming service that doesn't support 5.1, if it's being listened to in stereo, are the levels still good? Are things still happening? Remember, we have a 6-channel interface, 6-channel track right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to listen to it in 5.1 surround sound. Maybe I'm listening to, like I am right now, in stereo. So what are the levels for stereo? Since we really can't get an idea of it looking at the view meters over here on the left, we need something that's going to tell us total loudness when I get this folded down to stereo, or even mono for that matter. Let's take a look at the multimeter. Woo-wee! Look at this multimeter. Love it. So right now it's the sum of all of the parts. So this is the overall 6-channel mix range. We can actually go ahead and get rid of some of these and just listen to the LFE. So we can actually meter just one at a time. If I go to the center channel, this is the center channel. If I just want to listen to right and left as stereo, this is what right and left stereo mix would look like. Again, bringing them all in gives you a nice overview of the total sum of everything. Right now I'm in peak, so we could do RMS slow, which is just an average over time. You know what RMS is, right? And then again, we're just kind of viewing this, getting an idea. We're really not, going crazy about what it is and breaking it down yet, because we're just metering it. We're just listening to it. We're not actually creating it just yet. Remember the goniometer? Remember this guy? Or maybe you don't, because this is one of the things that when we were doing mastering last week and the week before, when we talked about in Logic, this is kind of your stereo spread. So you know that any sound that's traveling along the center line is very mono, very narrow, centered right there in, like between your eyes. Anything else that's traveling outside of that, whether it be on the right signal or the left signal vectors, are showing you the information. Right now I'm in left and right, but I can actually just look at the rear and see how much the difference between left on the rear and left in the front is going to be. So again, just viewing things, just taking a look at it and see what the visualizations show us. And again, I'm not even listening to it. So that's the signal if I had it actually playing back, which I don't. Let's go to balance. Let's see what that's all about. Oh, look, I built a house. So this is actually showing you your 5.1 surround sound setup, right? Your center channel is usually out in front of you at a distance. Your left and right should be, or feel like they should be, on the same x-axis as your ears. And then your left side and right side are showing things of, basically where the balance of sound is. So as you can see, the sides are being highlighted. There's stuff going on everywhere right now, all over the house, as it's showing you. But it's also showing you, the low frequency correlation with what's going on above. So if there's not as much low frequency information, it'll drop towards the left. If there's more, it would come up towards the yellow and green line, like right there. And it's going to show you that there's more presence of the low frequency, just meaning the sub in the mix. If I want to look at a correlation between, and that was, by the way, the center channel and the sub. If I want to look at how LCR, that's the front of house, that's the stuff that's going on up front, correlates with the low frequency, you could do that. And then I could just look at the total sum of everything and just see how they're playing off each other, right? I'm just getting a visualization of how this is going to sound in a 5.1 environment. So this is a cool meter. I love this one because it just tells you a lot. Just looking at it, it tells you a lot about what's going on. And there's one last meter in here. And obviously, they're all 5.1 meters. But this is interesting. There's actually a 5.1 tuner, a guitar tuner in 5.1. I don't know why they did it like this. I guess it just is adapted to 5.1. But I just thought, kind of cool. Also, when we look at things like the adaptive limiter now and the compressor, you're going to see multi-mono. And it really doesn't look all that different, though now in 5.1, in the mode of 5.1, our adaptive limiter has these little buttons up here, right? So the input and output looks relatively the same. We have the gain, the ceiling. Remember when we did the mastering, we dropped the ceiling, we moved the gain, so we brought it up to industry standard. But up here, what we're looking at is all 5 channels, a mix of all 5 channels, left and right, left center, left side, right side, and center channel. If I wanted to look at just the low frequencies, I actually have the ability to separately adaptive limit the low frequencies. So I can really just find that really sub bass and push it a little more if I feel like there's not enough of it in the 5-1. And then if I wanted to, have them all coupled together, I could connect them and disconnect them, meaning to say if I did this, and you'll see that they are relatively connected, that now when you bring one up or one down, they will react the same. Now, here's the other cool thing. There's a new visualizer in the adaptive limiter. Oh, this is a lot of fun. So this visualizer is actually showing you the ability to now adaptive limit individual channels. That's crazy, right? So I can basically go through and take off the channels up here. I made this one B and this one C. And I can see they start popping in here as individual. I could turn them off independently. So I can adaptive limit maybe just the center channel, or I could adaptive limit just the left side. I mean, there is a bunch of ways that you can manipulate the adaptive limiter. Again, all you're doing is looking to push the volume without changing the overall dynamic range. So what's really cool about being in 5-1 mode is that a lot of these things change and adapt to 5-1. Let's take a look at the multipressor for a moment. So again, same thing. It's tying in LR, LS, RS, and C as a mix. But if I want to individually change them and multi-press, let's say just the center channel, then I could put it on its own group. I could power it on and off. I could say, hey, my center channel is great. I don't need a multi-pressor on it, but I do want to press, what's going on the left and right side. So it's very cool concept that in 5.1 surround sound, now we're able to individualize all 6 channels for effects, because you can't see them here on separate channels, right? There's no 6 channels here. So how do I address a change that I need to make on a specific channel, like the LFE, which is the sub, right? So let's do this. Let's pop on the EQ, right? Basic. And what you're noticing here in the EQ is we are actually seeing a couple of different, sorry, I'm just making sure I know which ones I'm looking at. Yeah, a couple of different waveforms. And so you see there is a white waveform reading out, showing you peaks and cuts in the frequency range. Oh, I'm being distracted too. And then the other one, let's look at the LFE. There's the LFE by itself. If we wanted to really, truly cut out all the high frequency from even reaching the LFE, we know that we can probably do about, 500 or lower. And now basically that's all you need on that. And you can see, look, take a look over here in the channel strip. You're not seeing the thumbnail that I just did. That's because that thumbnail is supposed to be for this one. Now watch. Boom, and there it is. See, it changes. So you can tell they're independent of each other simply by looking at the thumbnail. Independent channel EQ. How cool is that? I really do like what Logic has done for 5.1. Pro Tools is way behind the ball on this and has not integrated 5.1 at the regular version level. I think at HD, they've kind of worked on it and done some things. Obviously, people do use Pro Tools to do movie mixes and 5.1 surround sound mixes. But man, Logic has really set the bar high and been able to do really cool things. Yeah, so my EQ is awesome. And other effects, let's say if we wanted to put a reverb plugin, right? We'll do Space Designer in 5.1. It's just crazy. 5.1 Space Designer. All right, so you can see down here we have the LFE to reverb. We're not going to send any of the low frequencies to reverb, but the center channel is going to get some. And you can see, by the way, that now the Space Designer has been finally updated to give it a brand new look and feel. But it's the same old Space Designer. Nothing really has changed. You still have all your presets here. IR versus synthesized IR, which we know about. One is actually a space. One is a virtual space. And like I said, all those presets are still here. I think they actually added a few. There's a couple of weird ones that I saw. I was like, oh, I don't remember that one. But there's so many, maybe I just don't remember them. And we can, well, sorry, I was going to go in there and just show you that you can feed individual channels if I could find it. I did this before, and I think I changed the settings. No, I changed the settings in the thing. Um, but yeah, you can go into each individual, just like the EQ and just like the compressor, go to each channel and add a little reverb to each one. What's also interesting, of course, is now you can start using very specific bussing, and the bussing then has a 5.1 mixer in it. So if I'm bussing out a 5.1 channel, it's actually going to bus out all 5 or 6 channels at this point to the send. And take a look at that. See? So everything in the software kind of um, uh, assimilates to 5.1 type of movements. You know, creating the buses creates 5.1 buses. Independent pan is interesting. That's pretty cool. So right now, this is very cool. I am actually only sending a certain amount of signal to the bus. I haven't played with this feature yet. This is relatively new. This is how you get really deep into the software. You just play and find out new things. But independent ones, which is amazing. Let's get rid of this. And wow, there's ones that you could send to faders too. Look at that. Let's set that back up for a second. So check this out. Sends on faders. Let's see what this looks like. I mean, it doesn't look much different in the mixer, but I know what's going on in the background, and it's a really cool idea. All right. We'll get into that in a little bit, maybe next week or so when we start working with actual film in this. So yeah, I mean, our surround, that was weird. It like popped on me. Our surround can be folded out to a stereo mix. So I can actually take my 5.1, which is right here, right? And push it to just left and right. Now, this would give you a good accurate report on, you know, what two speaker setup would sound like. Like for instance, I'm on a 2-speaker setup right now. So let's listen for the differences. I'll keep it in 5.1 and then I'll switch it over to stereo. Let's see if we can hear a difference. So as I switched it from stereo over to surround, you heard a lot more noise fill out the entire stereo field. It actually is now blending into the stereo output, the left and right back, the center channel, and some of the LFE. So what happens is it basically takes the sum of all of those, folds them into a stereo file, and gives it to you. You lose a lot of that spatial perception when you do that, but obviously it gets much louder and things are a lot more centered. Now, the other thing is, you know, how do we determine what channel is what? So when I look in here, and I'll go back to this for a moment. When I go back in here, you know, how do I know this is input number 1, input 2, input 3, input 4, input 5? So Logic does have a area of the preferences that allows you to determine IO assignments for 5.1. Now, when we first started the project, we actually already selected the 5.1 ITU, which I like. It's fine with that. And then I usually just hit ITU anyway because defaults are a little different in regards to its outputs. You can see the channels change a little bit, but I tend to like output 1 is being my left, output 2 is being my right. So that's your stereo mix 1 and 2. That's what you're looking at over here in the software. And then the other ones tend to get folded back. So my 3 is center, my 4 is LFE. Now I usually change that to 6 and I make L4R5. I like that. And how we have it at the studio with those speakers floating in the air is this: 1 is left, 2 is right, 3 is center, 4 is left back, 5 is right back, and then LFE is my 6th channel. This is not your typical ITU setup. This is a setup that I designed to match a lot of the formats that I already had sound in. For instance, This one, this particular audio file actually was built exactly the way I have it listed here in Logic. So, I like to adapt to the industry. And what's funny is when you do have a really good audio file created by an engineer, they usually program it in the file to select the right channel to go to the right place. And I know it sounds weird, but a lot of the information in the metadata of a file does tell you about what it is and how it was created. If I go back to my desktop really quick and I can here we go on this guy, and I go to the little command I, there is some information here. There's actually a link that actually will tell me how things were built and how things work. Now, also, if it's here, maybe it's not in this one. Maybe I definitely had another one with it, but it does have audio channel. Oh, there's the 6 channels. That's what I was looking for. It tells me it's 6 channels. It tells me it's 5 minutes and 29 seconds. I thought I had more information in this one. Maybe it's on this movie file that has more information. And again, this is just telling me where you can find the information about it. So if I were to cut and paste this information and put it into a web browser, hopefully I'm not going to get bombed here. Yikes. I guess not. Yeah, it might be too old. I got this file a while ago. No, and it definitely wasn't in 17. I'm thinking it's more like 12. But we have the ability to see independent channels. And a lot of times the people that do it right will actually, no, this is a Spider-Man one. Sorry, I didn't know this was the one I grabbed. So yeah, it was 2017. They usually include a data sheet where you get the file. So if I got this file as 5.1 Spider-Man Homecoming trailer, in that folder where I got it, I would also find the data for which speakers were to which ones. Now, there is some sort of consistency in the industry. It's not like every single time you got to check your ins and outs, right? I do it anyway because I'm crazy. But for the most part, it's going to have pretty much the setup of 5.1 and then ITU. You start there. And then if you find that some speakers are crossed, I mean, it's very simple. You go into the preferences and then you uncross them and you change your outputs to reflect what's going on in your speakers. Again, we have a 5.1 surround sound system at school. You're going to need an interface that allows you to go out more than just 2 channels. So like, for instance, my Focusrite right here only has 2 outputs. So output 1 is going to be left like it always is, and output 2 is going to be right. And that's that. But when you have a multi-channel output, like my Mark of the Unicorn 828, or like the Zoom outputs in the booths, where you have 8 channels out, you can actually do your 5.1 output. And then each individual channel will have its output to its own speaker. And that would feed the 5.1 that you're monitoring. All right. So yeah, there's this little interface here that's really important. Like I said, we started the project at 5.1 ITU. It set us up for this, but then I usually go in and change things a little bit. And once you do that, now you know your outputs are right. So anytime now that you're metering, anytime now that you're doing the things that we were doing earlier, like limiting or multi-pressing, we know that we can listen and hear what's going on in those. Let's go back to the metering loudness one, the level meter again. Oh, no, I'm sorry, wrong one. Was it the multimeter? No. Where the hell? Oh, it was this. Duh. No, this is just the pan meter. So the other cool thing is, and this is, I have a lot of fun doing this, especially in school because we have the 5.1 setup, is as I'm listening back, I can actually start dumping speakers out. So if I'm playing back and, I'm hearing things in 5.1, if I don't want to hear these 2 left backs, all I do is just take them out of the mix. So right now, this is it. I'm only hearing center channel. Now, you're not hearing center channel because obviously our stereo speakers here are taken out of the mix. Speakers 1 and speaker 2 are gone. Even if I put these in here, you're not going to hear anything because we don't have them set up. We don't have the LFE set up. All we have is stereo sound. So I put these back on. There's my left channel. There's my right channel. Interesting, right? So now I'm hearing a stereo mix. Putting these in isn't going to make anything different except for showing you in the meter that it's there. Ooh, Fast and Furious. It's interesting when you take the movie away and you're just listening to sound, how they built all that. You know, the gear shifts, the rev of the engines, the squeal of the tires. Quite cool. All right. Then also talking about this panel while we're here, same thing as yesterday that we discussed, where you could take this and move it around. You can automate that as well. So if I reset this, push play, and I start moving it off to the left, now it's only coming out of the left speaker. If I push it off to the right, it's only coming out of the right. Now, had we have 5 speakers and we were in the classroom, you'd actually hear it coming out of the left-hand side of the classroom and the right-hand side of the classroom. You'd actually hear it move across the classroom, over your heads, not really over, but like through your heads, over to the other side of the classroom. I can move it from the front of the class, shoot it all the way to the back of the class. A lot of cool ways that you can manipulate. And we also, by the way, and I'm gonna go back in here for a second, redo that. And I'll get rid of my loudness meter. I don't need that. We also have the ability, why is it moving? Get back in there. Back over there. There it is. We also have the ability, again, like I said, to change the center channel level and to change the sub level. That's all in here. So if we were, again, doing some automation, and I put myself into a little touch mode, and I want to do, let's do pan. Let's go to main. And now take a look. Remember yesterday we were talking about the binaural angle and radius. And now it's a little different. Now it's surround sound center channel, surround angle, surround radius, and surround LFE. So those are the 4 ways you can manipulate and automate the surround sound panner. All right. Doing regular pan is just left and right, no big deal. But when we can actually do an angle, a radius, or an LFE, let's do angle. Now when we play back, we can actually manipulate it. Move it around. Now the music kicks in. Now it'd be a lot more difficult to do it. So look, when we did those moves, right, we're actually able to see now the automation. And that's the angle, and this is the radius automation. And again, if we put this back and then we go ahead and watch it again, we could see those moves being made in real time. Pretty cool, right? And changes are being made, but we're not really hearing the big change because we're not in a 5.1 environment. We're in a stereo environment. So we heard small changes as it went from left to right, but nothing crazy, nothing that would go, wow, look at that. You really need a 5.1 to do that. Let's try this. I'm going to explore this for a little bit. Let's try to create a 5.1 environment. Now this gets a little tricky and I don't know if they've changed it. Again, I just got the new version. I haven't spent too much time doing this, but we're going to create our own surround sound system. So when you start a new track, if you recall, some of the details here, input and output, obviously ascending load library, we want an audio track. In the audio input, we can actually put surround, or in the audio output, we can actually put surround. So I'm actually going to build it like that. I'm going to make the audio output surround. I'm going to actually make 6 tracks, and I'm going to hit OK. So now every single track has a output of the surround sound panner. So now you can see things are a little different considering that we're using a mono audio track to feed a surround sound panner. But now this allows me to do what we were talking about before. Track 1 is usually off to the left. That's my left-hand channel. So I bring that all the way over here, right to that speaker. Track 2 would be my right. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to right to the right. So now I'm building my 5.1 mix. My center channel would be the third. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that right at the third one and really define it here because we got individual ones. My 5th one is going to be, what do I always use? I use, that's left. So we'll go left side. So I'll make it really defined again. My 6th channel, how I record these is off here to this one. And then my final one, I usually center it. It's just an easy way for all of these to work. And in this one, I'm going to take the center level out and push the LFE level all the way in, just like that. So now, I'm going to get, yeah, that's about right. I don't mind that. So this is a nice, easy way to kind of set up your 5-1. So now, all right, let's mute this because we don't need this in the mix. How do we want to approach, working with our 5-1s, right? So 1, 2, where the heck did 2 go? Did I delete 2? They're all set up right. They're just named wrong. So now I can start building my stereo track. If I wanted these guys to work as a stereo pair, as my left and right, I could actually join them. I don't really want to make them those guys do that. No, not really. Yeah, maybe I would. Maybe I would. But we'll leave that for now. And so what I'm trying to do is say to myself, okay, my main mix, my main stereo mix, left and right speakers in the front, these are the main tracks going to have that. So they're going to have the dialogue. They're going to have some of the music, obviously some of the main action that happens. And then the third channel is going to be my center channel. So this is going to be the supportive blend of channels 1 and 2. My 5th and 6th channels are going to be my rear. So it's not going to have as much information, though if something's happening behind the listener, behind the camera, then we'll have, something new and exciting to see or hear at that point. Then, yeah, I probably would have to automate that a little bit and then bring it back, have it blend over into the the first or second track over in the front. And again, it's all about movement and how things are going to be. And then, of course, my sub is pretty much going to be fed by a mix of everything, but it's going to have a roll off and only be low frequency. So it's a complicated way to kind of put it all together. It probably is a new way of doing it. This is how I did it in the old version, but now things look a little different. So I'm assuming that we could probably build it much easier. But as you saw, creating in a surround sound input or output is now a lot easier with, no, wait. Yes, we're going to close this. And yes, we're going to save it. But when you start a new project in 5.1 ITU, the other thing is we actually could do an surround sound input, which was also interesting and new and exciting. So if I did that and an output of surround, I hit create. Now you see one track, right? That's interesting. And you could see the one input from input number 1 on my Focusrite is there. If I were to go do a recording with the orchestra, right? Think about it. When we did the symphony, the adult orchestra, we could actually set up 5 mics, feed the 6th sub with all the other 5 mics as well, and create a true surround sound project. We actually do that now. We recorded these tracks. We recorded the symphony, and we did what? I think 8 or 10 tracks. I'm trying to remember. I think we did about 8, right? 8 mics, maybe 6, but either way, we had enough, right? We had enough mics, and we could actually now place them in this surround sound environment and have things happen. You could bring the experience of sitting on stage with the orchestra to your home, where you would hear the violins off to the right, the cellos off to the left, the trumpets and everything out in front of you, the soloists, out. You could have the audience to your back. Very cool way of kind of arranging it where you could create complete perspective of a moment using 5.1, both in the recording stage, in the post-production stage, and in the output stage. So Logic was built for this. This is one of the reasons why I would say Logic has my vote as top DAW out there. Find me another program that does surround sound work like this one does. I know Pro Tools has it. You don't have to tell me that, but it's just not as good as handling it as Logic is. Logic is excellent at this. Questions about surround sound, because I'm spent. I had a hell of a night. Tired. And I need to lock the kids out of the house. They need to stay outside all day. I think I'm going to feed them through the dog door. Just push the food right out the bottom. I'll make pancakes so I don't even have to open the door. It just slides underneath. Just slide the pancakes out from underneath. Nobody has questions? Awesome. I'm out. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Get some work done. Blah, blah, blah. See you tomorrow for the test. Holla, holla.